All right. So I know last time I had some technical difficulties when creating the panel, and that is because custom pattern based families, they require a certain level of customization associated with them. They're very specific because of the fact that they're working with very complex geometries and curvature. You have to be very specific with how you set up those different parameters. So how you set up the offset, how you set up, if you want to add some rotation or if you want to scale it. They all require you to be very precise and set it up very in the proper way. Otherwise, they're going to fail, like a couple of the ways that I tried out before. And it had been a while since I had done them, so I apologize in advance. But today, really quickly, we'll go over how to set up one of those. And I want to do this. I know it's not necessarily applicable to everyday Revit use, but when we start to go into creating parametric models and parametric scripting with Dynamo, we're going to be using these families to create some of those parametric elements, and we need to know how to set those up correctly to be able to accurately create those gradations or affect the elements in the way that we want. So we'll open up the project from last class, and I have gone in and deleted all of the top roof structure. Now we're going to set up a rhomboid. Now we've had issues loading in a existing family and overwriting it. So I want to start off with just a blank file and start by creating a new family without dividing the surface or anything yet. So we'll create a new family, the current panel, pattern-based family. Hit open. All right, and then I believe we were creating a rhomboid before, so let's do that again. Select the grid, go to the drop down on the right, and hit rhomboid. Okay, so we got the reference points and the reference planes for the boundary of that panel. And so we're going to do a couple things with this this specific panel. We're going to offset it, but instead of doing the offset in the way that we set up before, where we're just doing the extrusion distances differently, we're going to actually set up a boundary line that's offset. And to do that, there's a very specific way how to. So in set work plane up at the top, we'll want to set it to the horizontal plane along the adaptive reference point. So we want to hover over that horizontal plane and click to set it, and then go in and choose a point and just click over that first point. Okay, so now that's set a point on the reference point. And you might have to tab through to select the point itself. Make sure that you're not selecting the reference point with the three planes, but just the simple point itself. So if we click that, on the right hand side, it's going to give you a bunch of different parameters. On the bottom, it has an offset parameter, and this is going to offset that point from the plane that we set, which is from the adaptive point, perpendicular to that plane. So if we go in and we type in 1 foot, it now offsets that point 1 foot from the plane. And so we're going to use that parameter to be the basis of the offset from the original surface. So if we click that guy, now we can do this one of two ways. Now we've gone in and set a parameter and created a parameter by clicking these gray buttons to the right of the parameter. But I want to show you how to create a parameter completely from scratch without using any of the other tools. So under the parameter manager, it's called family types, but I call it just a parameter manager. This opens up all the parameters that are currently existing within the family. Down at the bottom, there is a new parameter button. If you click that, it's going to open up the parameter creation window that we're familiar with. But we got to be careful because the type of parameter and the group parameter settings, those are typically defaulted to whatever parameter we've created before. And when you're setting up one from scratch, you need to be aware of what type of parameter you're going to be setting up. So we're creating a parameter for the offset. We want that to be type parameter for right now. Common. It will be a length because it's a dimension, and the dimension, it's already set. So for that, we didn't have to change anything, but sometimes you'll have to change this to either angle or an area if you want a specific parameter to be an area, if it's just a number, etc. But since it's a length, we'll set there. So press OK. And then let's set that offset to 2 feet. Press OK. And then when we select that point and go to the associate family parameter, now it has an offset, and we can press OK. And now that point has an offset of 2 foot from the parameter that we just set. Now, since we want to create essentially this panel, but offset from the base surface, we need to create 4 points. So doing the same thing that we had just done for this point, let's go to set and set different planes, associate the points with it, and then toggle the offset for the offset parameter, and then do that for the remaining 2 points. And we can do these 2 at the same time. Okay. Now we have both points selected. Change the offset. Now they all are connected. Now, with these types of families, we want to be able to associate all geometry and all of the subsequent line work or reference lines or points. We want those all to be associated back to this reference plane, the original grid and the original reference points. So when we create lines, we want to make sure that they are tied to whatever geometry we just created. So these points that we just offset, we want all of the corresponding geometry to tie back to those. So what we'll do is we're going to do spline through points. Now, I have kind of warned several of you from using spline through points because within the Revit environment, spline through points, it can cause a lot of issues that just the regular spline doesn't. But for this specific purpose, we want to do spline through points. And that is because it creates a curve directly through those 2 points. Now this line is tied to those 2 points. So anywhere on the double curved surface, those points are going to move associated with that grid. And now this line is also going to move with those points. So it's all tied back together. So when we put it on the complex curvature or the complex surface, it all adapts to the warped grid that is created. So now we have this line that is associated with those 2 points, and what we're going to do is over here on the right hand side of the screen under properties, there's an is reference line checkbox. We're going to check that. Now this turns into a reference line. You will not be able to see this within the Revit environment, but you can use this as basis for the next several pieces of geometry. So we're going to do that to the opposite side. So select those 2 points and hit spline through points. Hit reference line, is reference line. Now, if we just wanted to create a panel that is offset from the original base surface, we could go around and do a spline through points along all 4 sides, like so. Whoa, 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 whoa. Excuse me. Like so. Sorry, I got fat fingers tonight. And change these 2 lines to reference planes. Now we've essentially created the boundary line that we have down here, just offset from the surface, and we can use those reference lines as our basis for our panel and do the same thing that we had done before. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but tonight we're actually going to do one greater step. What we're going to do is not only have a parameter that offsets from the base surface, but we're also going to create a scaled down version of the panel. So the panel is going to either scale and get smaller or scale up and get larger. Give me 1 second. I gotta go let my dog in. Sorry about that. Okay, get back to this. So to do that, we can't just offset this reference plane inwards because then it won't be associated with whatever manipulations, transformations these points go through to align themselves with the manipulated grid on our divide surface. So what we're going to do is introduce what's called normalized curve parameters. And to do that, if we go up and select the point element, place a point, actually place 2 points on one of the reference planes. So 1, 2, and make sure to make sure that they are hosted to that reference plane. Make sure that it is highlighted in blue before you place it. Okay, now when we click these points, they're going to create a plane that is perpendicular with the line. And if you click it, on the right underneath properties, down here is a normalized curve parameter. And it is a number between 0 and 1, and it reflects where on the reference plane or reference line it is in relation to percentages, essentially. So 0.25 is going to be a quarter of the way across the line. 0.5 is going to be halfway, and if we do that, you can see how it adjusts. So we just typed in 0.5, it is going halfway. If we did 0.25, it goes back to a quarter. If we do 0.75, it goes 3/4 of the way across. And it's all based around how the line was created. So we probably selected this point first, then that point, did the spline through. And so it has its start point being on this end and its end point being on this end. Now, we can set parameters for that. And to do that, let's see. So how to explain this? So what we're going to do is we want these 2 points to be on the same distance away from the endpoints, but on different sides. So when this point is 0.25, we want this point to be 0.75. And of course, we could do this by just creating 2 separate parameters and typing them in twice manually. But we can use the formula part of the parameters to create some parametric nature to the parameters. So if we go into the family types manager. Let's create a new parameter down at the bottom left. And we'll do this as RCP, let's do low, whatever. So the lower number. And like I mentioned before, you'll have to change these sometimes based on whatever type of parameter you're creating. So with the RCP, it is not a dimension or a length. It's actually just a pure number. So we want to change this to number. Have that stay as others, and then press OK, and then we're going to create one more RCP high, and then remember to change this from length to number. Press OK. Okay, and now we want low, and we'll start off with low at 0.25. Now we want RCP high to be the opposite of RCP low. And remember that our our RCP is from 0 to 1. So 1 is the highest it can be, obviously. And so what we want to do is do 1, start off with the whole number, and then subtract, and then type in RCP low, and that will create the inverse. Essentially 1 minus whatever we have for RCP low, which is 0.25, which creates 0.75. And then whatever we type in for RCP low, let's say 0.3, 0.7, 0.4, 0.6, 0.1, you get it. Okay? Now, RCPs are generally what you'll be manipulating for your parametric models. So under, and we created these right now as type parameters. So what I want you to go in and do is edit the parameter. So remember that when we create a parameter, it is not set in stone. You can always go in and edit it and change it from type to instance. So let's do that. Change it from type to instance, and then do the same thing. Edit parameter, instance, and then press OK. All right, so now we've created the parameters. Let's associate them with the points. So under select a point, under normalized curve parameter, hit RCP low, and then do the opposite for the other point, RCP high. And then let's create 2 more points on the opposite reference line. RCP low. And this might, oh, no, you're right. Sometimes you gotta figure out which side is which, because sometimes the lines can be created and have different start and end points. RCP high for the opposite point. Okay, so now we have those selected. What I want you to do is do the same thing that we did when we created the splines. Select the 2 points that are opposite from each other. Do spline through points. And then I always, before I unselect that line, I just create that checkbox is reference line, and then do the same thing for the other points. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see it yet, but we're starting to create the 2 outside boundaries for the scaled panel. Now, what we got to do is create the opposite side, the 2 additional sides. And to do that, we already have the parameters we're going to need set up. So all we got to do is place a couple more points. So on those 2 newly created reference lines, place 2 points on each, and then select 2 opposite points, go over to the normalized curve parameter, select one of the 2 RCP parameters, okay, and then do the same thing for the opposite points. Select, oops, select both, go to the parameter, to RCP low, or the opposite of the one you just did. Okay, and then do the same thing. Select the 2 points, do a spline through point, and it does kind of suck that you have to do 2 points at a time, but if you try, and I'll just show this because I'm sure some of you are wondering, if you select more than 2 points and do spline through points, it's going to give you a curved spline. So you got to do 2 points at a time to create those straight linear lines. So create those as reference lines, and then we're gonna, I don't know if you can see it, but we essentially have the scaled down version of our panel. Now we just have to create a couple reference lines between these 2 points and these 2 points to create an entire boundary reference set of reference lines that we can create a panel from. So select the 2 remaining points, just spline through point, and say is reference line, and then do the same thing for these 2 points down here, spline through points, is reference line, and now if you hover over it, you get a scaled down version of the outside boundary line that is offset from the original surface. And all you got to do to create that new panel is create form. Remember, select the extrusion down here, and then to create a dimension parameter, hit that dimension toggle, that dimension icon. Let's create a thickness parameter. Press OK. And then one thing we haven't, I don't think we've done before, might have done. If we select the entire form, on the right we have a material parameter. Let's create a panel material parameter. Press OK. So now we can control the material of this panel. Galena. Let's change that thickness from 6 feet to 2.25. So let's do 3 inches. Okay. And then so that's the proper way to create a offset panel that is scalable. So it's essentially a percentage. So if we go in, and since all of these points, all of the scaled elements are tied to this RCP low, whatever we type in, 0.25, if we apply that, it scales everything uniformly. Because everything is tied to one another. It's tied to itself, the RCP high, so the opposite, and all of those are scalable based on those reference lines. So when we go in and we want to create a parametric script that changes the scale of a panel, we'll go in and we'll essentially create a gradient of numbers within a list from 0 to 0.5, and then associate those numbers to this parameter within the families, and it'll change all of these parameters within that gradient of numbers. I know getting a little bit in the weeds right now, but if you press OK, and then well, we have to save this family and give it a name. So rhomboid panel. Yes, replace that one. And then So now that you know how to create those, you can really add a significant amount of detail onto this. So you could create a, let's say we do reference or spline through these points. You could create a frame that it adjusts to one itself. So you could create a circle radius around this reference line, extrude it throughout. Here, I'll do it really quick. Is reference line, and then create a point on here. Set this guy. You don't have to do this, just follow along. So now if I change the scale, so I'm essentially creating a frame that frames this out and adds a little bit higher level of detail and realism to these panels, so they're not just some panel floating off in space. So if I change the scale of the panel, this frame adjusts to it, and then if I change the offset of the frame, it also adjusts to it. Alright, now we didn't need to have that, so I'll just delete them for right now. So let's load this into our project. Project 1. Overwrite the existing. And now if we go into the mass, and remember, if you've opened up your project and you cannot see your mass, 99% of the time, if you go under your visibility and graphics settings on the right, under properties, and scroll down to mass, it's probably going to be unchecked. It's a default that Revit does when you first create a mass and you log out of your file. When you log back in, they uncheck the mass. Don't know why, but it happens all the time. So if you do not see your mass, check this. Check here first. All right. So make sure that's checked on. Edit in place. Select that top double curved surface. Divide that surface, and then under the patterns, go down to rhomboid. Your panel family should be under there. Select it, and then give it a second. And now you have fully parametric rhomboid panel system that you can change the offset of. So let's do 2 feet. And you can also change the scale of. Now, the RCP is not going to show up underneath the type parameters, and it's not going to show up underneath the family properties on the right, because this is actually the grid family. If you want to change the scale of an individual panel, you have to tab in to select that one panel, click it, and then down under other, that's where our RCP parameter is, and that's where we can change the panel size. Remember, because it is an instance parameter, it is specifically for that instance of the family, not the type of family in general. Okay, so I am going to pause the tutorial real quick, but we are quickly going to go over how to set up a sheet, as well as layout drawings and set up drawings so that they have a more graphic representation and that they can be easily exported from Revit to be put into your presentations without having to have significant, if any, post-production associated with it. All right, I'm going to finish the mass here. I'm going to save the file real quick, and then I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so back in our File. So we want to set up a couple sheets and a couple drawings and place those on those sheets, and then set up a couple graphic styles to output. So real quick, so that we have a little bit more three-dimensionality and detail to the drawings that we can manipulate, what we want to do, since we have two faces of the mask that don't have anything associated with them, let's do wall by face. Let's just select a generic 8-inch. Actually, let's just do 8-inch. 8-inch. Select the one, select the other, and then let's do a floor. And remember to to be able to host a floor to a mask, we have to create mask floors. So select that mask, and then click the Mask Floors tab. And just select one for level 1. And then under the floor, do floor by face. Let's do 12-inch. Actually, let's just do 12-inch. Sorry, I'm very indecisive today. And then select that mask floor, and then up the top hit create floor. Now we have created floor, some walls, curtain wall, and some crazy roof panel system. So to create a sheet, some of you have already figured out how to do this, but under View tab, there is, under the sheet composition, there is a sheet, create a sheet page. And there is a couple that are preloaded, but these have Autodesk preloaded template. So if we opened up like the 11x17, it has this really ugly Autodesk title block, which we do not want. So what we can do is either we can go under the new sheet and hit load, and then scroll down to templates, title blocks, and of course there's no title blocks. Why is that? Alright, let's go to File, Open, and Family. Go back down to Templates, title blocks. Why is that empty? You're not gonna have, yeah, see, I had this before. Some of you may have this. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I was on, so this is the little library. You guys should have the out-of-the-box US Imperial. So you guys should see all of these different size title blocks. Ugh, where did I find it? Sorry, when I go through and do these before to make sure I don't, well, I tried to do it before so I don't run into any issues. Of course, that's not going to happen today. There should be some blank ones somewhere. I don't know why they're not appearing. So let's just cancel out. So one way to create a really simple sheet is if we edit the family and then just delete all this stuff, but keep the outside border. And then we can change the dimensions of this guy. So let's say we wanted to create a 24 by 36 inch, which I think is still the standard you guys use for your boards, or 36 by 48. In practice, we use 30 inches by 42 inches. I don't know why, but oh well. So let's save this, create a new 24 by 36 sheet, then load back into our project. Okay, and then under sheets. So you can either, when we go into view and create new sheet, now that 24 by 36 is populated and we can select it. Or if we've already created a sheet and it has a title block that we do not like, you can just select the title block, and under the drop down under properties, you can also change it to that 24 by 36. So now I have a blank title block that we can populate our drawings in. So it's 24 by 36, and when we select the level 1 to place a view onto a sheet, all you have to do is click and drag that view into the paper space. Now we have that view. So that view, that view is at the scale that you have selected. So right now it's at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, and that is scaled correctly to the 24 by 36 inch piece of paper. So when you print it out, it is automatically scaled. Now, if you want to change that scale, all you got to do is select the view, and under the view scale, under properties, you can make it a little bit smaller or bigger, depending on the size of your paper and the level of detail within your drawing that you want to convey to whoever is looking at it. So honestly, 1/8 is pretty good. So I'll change mine to 1/8. You can change yours to whatever your heart desires. And then I'm going to move these. So right now, underneath the extents of the view, we do not have crop view selected. We don't have a crop region. And so it's just going to the outside boundaries of whatever is in the drawings page, which is right now the elevations. So all we got to do is take those elevations, pull them in a little bit. Now, these elevation markers, something to consider when you're doing both drawings for your design presentations as well as design presentations for your clients, is elevation tabs and some section markers. They're not the most aesthetically pleasing things in the world. So even though we use these markers, these annotation symbols, to create the views, so to create the north, west, east, south, did that backwards, elevations, you don't have to use those in your presentation. So you could hypothetically hide this elevation, and then in Illustrator or InDesign or something else, you could create a really nice, aesthetically beautiful elevation marker and stick that in there in the drawing. So just be aware. Don't feel like you have to use what is preloaded into Revit, because it's not always the most aesthetically pleasing and the most design. Hi, Rayla. Hello. Go lay down. Go lay down. Sorry, my dog's being very needy right now. So let's just keep those in there for right now. Oh, and I forgot a couple of the most important things when dealing with sheets. So organizationally, this is good for both your school projects as well as when you get into professional practice. Each sheet has a number and a name. And if you right-click and go to rename, it pops up with both a number and a name that you can change. So let's just call this one A100 for right now. And then name, we'll just create, I don't know, Comp Prac Sheet 1. Sheet A. I don't know. Whatever you want. Alright. And then if you go to rename, and let's say instead of A100, you do A200 and then blah, 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 blah. Press OK. Of course. Let's do that again, but not be so blatantly ridiculous. Just call it Comp Prac Sheet B. That organizes itself. So if, let's say, we had an A150 sheet, it's going to nestle itself between the A100 and A200. It organizes itself based on alphabetical and numerical designations within this structure. So if you want one sheet to be above another, make it either alphabetically before itself or numerically before itself, before the other. Anyway, getting back to the views. So you have a title block, or what is this called? Viewport, title line, whatever. That has the name and the scale associated with it, as well as the number of drawing on the sheet. For what you guys are doing, I would recommend doing your naming, your scales, all that stuff within Illustrator. Create something a little bit more nice and beautiful. But if you do want to keep it, let's just go over how to change some of those things. So to change the information on the view name, you can't just click it. If you click it, you can move it around and it won't change the location of the drawing. If you click the drawing and move that around, the view name will move along with it. Now, if we want to edit the name or edit the number of the drawing, you have to select the drawing first and then click the name. You can change it to whatever, floor plan level 1. And then if you want to change the number, you also once again have to select the view, then hover over the number and change it. Now if you want to hide it all together, all you have to do is click the view, under properties, click the drop down and select no title. If you want to get real fancy, you can create your own title name with different aesthetics, different numbers. You can either turn the numbers off, you can turn the scales on and off. And there may be, I haven't actually looked yet because I typically just create my own, but there may be some on the internet that are pretty nice and may be adequate for your presentations that you can load in. Just be aware of that. But if we don't want a title, select no title. That will now disappear. Now we're just left with the drawing. So let us pull in some elevations. So let's pull in this elevation, which is east. So east, all we'll do, once again, click and drag that elevation in. Oops. Sorry. I was in the view, the floor plan. So when you're in the sheet, you can edit the view that you have placed on the sheet by either double clicking it. Now you can edit those elements within the drawing. To get out, double click outside the workspace. It'll unactivate it, deactivate it. Or you can right click and hit activate view, and then same thing, right click, deactivate view. All right, so once again, click that east, drag, drop it into the workspace. And then it's always nice to have drawings that are at the same scale on one sheet, so that people that are viewing the space can more accurately see it. And now one thing to notice, or two things to notice. One is that we have our title again, that is east, so let's turn that off. The other thing is that our elevation symbol for east has now changed from blank to having a 100 and the number of the view. So if we put the title on again, if we go in right now, it is the first number 1 drawing on the sheet. So over here it has a little number 1. If we change that to number 2, oh, sorry. If we change it to number 3, since this drawing is number 2, then we zoom back in, it has changed that number to 3. That is how people, contractors, architects, anyone who is looking at the drawing set can identify what sheet and what number drawing on that sheet that this specific view is. So like in professional practice, when you have drawing sets that are 100 pages long, you're not always going to be able to fit the referenced elevation or section on the same sheet. So people need to know where to look for that specific drawing. So let us uncheck no title, and then let's go into the view and drag these guys in. So that's a little bit nicer. And then let's do a couple more. Let's drag it north. Now, one thing to remember here is if you have a drawing of the same style, so if you have two elevations and they're both the same scale, if you're dragging them onto the sheet and you're dragging them around, you'll see that if you align it at the same elevation or at the same orientation as another drawing of the same type and of the same scale, it'll give you this little dashed line. Now, if we set it, now they're on the same plane, so the levels align, and they are on the same ground plane. So let's do the same thing as before. Double-click into the view, select that level, drag it in so it's a little bit cleaner. And it has that view title again, so let's go no title. And then let's do one more for fun. Let's do the west elevation. Okay. Of course, it doesn't fit. So what we can do is on all three, if we select all three of the drawings, go from 1/8 to 3/16. Oops, wrong way. 1/8 to 1 inch equals 10 feet. Now we have all of our drawings on the same sheet, and they're all in the same ground plane. And because I'm OCD about scale, we'll change the first floor plan. And since we have a really cool, here, I'll show you this too. So as you can see, the orientation of the floor plan is in the same orientation as this elevation. So if we drag it over, oh, I'm a liar. Sorry, I guess Revit's not that smart. I thought it was. I thought it would line up, but of course, it's not that smart. Okay, so we want a roof plan to be able to showcase our rhomboid roof. So site plan should have that. And right now the site plan is at 1 inch equals 40 feet, which is why it's so tiny. So let's change that to 1 inch equals 10 feet. Match our first floor plan. Since they're now the same scale, they align with each other, so they can either align vertically or they can align horizontally. Turn our title block off. And then I think I've covered this before, but if you want to change the grids, just like with levels, there's checkboxes on either side. They control the side where the bubbles are. Alright. Okay. So we have a couple drawings placed on our sheet. Now we can go in and start manipulating the different graphic styles for each drawing. So if we click into the elevation, all we got to do is click it. We don't have to double click into and activate the view. It populates our view properties. So we can change our visibility graphics, or we can set what is called a view template. So a view template is essentially all of the graphic styles and work sets and design options and other things that we won't get into right now, but everything that you can associate with a specific view If you want to associate it with multiple views and have them all be in the same graphic style, you'll want to apply the same view template to all of those. So if we click the view, one of the elevations, and then click view template, it'll populate some of the preloaded ones, and we can create new ones if we want. But for right now, let's just click architectural elevation, and then underneath, so this is where you set all of the properties that you would normally find on the right hand side here. So we can set the view, which we know is not 1/8. We want it to be 1 inch equals 10 feet. And then let's change our detail level from coarse to fine. And we want that to be the same. Okay, and then let's go to model display. So this is where we can change hidden line to shaded or realistic. Let's keep it at hidden line. We'll actually just add some poche. Let's see. Of course. All right. Let's see. So one thing that we can add that'll add a little bit of depth to our model is shadows. So let's edit that. Let's do cast shadows, and let's also cast ambient shadows. And then let's see for lighting. So click lighting and then sun settings. So when we're doing elevations or any other type of orthographic drawings, I typically like to do sunlight from either top left or top right, just so that they all are consistent in their shadows and where the sun is. Now, if you want them to accurately reflect where the sun is within the environment, you can go to single day or still and change it here. But I just like to have it all be from the top left. Press OK. Press OK. Hit all right. And there wasn't a huge amount of difference, but you can't see those shadows now. So let's go in and let us change all of the curtain wall panels from these thin lines to halftone. Go back into our elevation and let us go to override model components, which are what curtain walls are, curtain wall panels. And so under here, we can obviously check them on or off if we want to turn them on or off. You can also change the line weights, the pattern. So if we want it to have a certain pattern, let's actually do that. If you click that guy and then drop down and do a aluminum pattern, you can do that. And then the color. So color is automatically going to default to black, but we can change it to a nice lighter gray, so it's not super overpowering. Press OK. You can also add a level of transparency to some of these. Line weights, if you do the override for lines, you can change both the pattern, so we can create dash lines, center lines, any type of line that you can think of, as well as the color. So let's change it to red for let's change it to a nice maroon. And then the line weight. So 1 is the lightest, thinnest line that Revit will create, all the way up to 16, which is an extremely thick line. So let's just do 1 for right now. Press OK. And then cut. So cut patterns are when you have a section, or if you have a floor plan. We'll go over that when we do floor plans. But anytime the view cuts through an element, this is where you can override it. So that's where, if we have a section, we can poche the floors, or we can poche roofs that we're cutting through, etc. All right, and then the halftone. So halftone on the right, if we check that, it would make all of our, whatever that element is, halftone. So it would essentially do put a 50% opacity on it. So anything that's black is going to be gray. It's nice if you have a lot of lines populating to just turn those down. So Right now I've done the dash line for the lines, and then a aluminum pattern for the patterns. Press OK, then press OK again. Now all of those lines have turned to dash lines, and now we have an aluminum pattern associated with those. Oh, and it's changed it for these. Okay. So let's make it a little less gross. So let's go back in to our view template, override model elements. Let's turn this back to solid line. And then let's do this instead of aluminum, let's do solid. That's our typical. And then let's make it a little bit lighter gray so it's not too dark. Press OK. Press OK. Alright, now we have gray panels whose line work is red. I know, very exciting. But the other thing I want to show you, so right now, is my tight lines on inline? No, it's not. So if we go in right now and we change, select our view, go to architectural elevation, view template, and then go into our model elements. Let's change this line, the current panel line, from weight 1. So let's do weight line 6. Press OK. Press OK again. All right, see how all of those got thicker? So that's how we change the line thickness, line weight. And you can do that by going in manipulating different elements of specific lines. So it's a little bit chunky. So let's go in and let's turn that back down to 2. Press OK. And when you have a lot of elements on top of each other, you'll typically want to have those line weights be thinner. And now that we've set up that specific view template, the architectural elevation view template, we can associate that with these two drawings by just selecting both of them, going over to view template, hit that architectural elevation view template, hit OK. Now it changes both of those to the same style as here. Now you can get super involved with it. So if you wanted to change the floor, you can go back into your view template, scroll down to floors, change the floors, change furniture, any type of element that you have within the drawing, you can change the graphic style here. Now, if you're unsure of what type of element any type of your model is, all you have to do is select that specific element, and right here in this drop down, it will tell you the exact type of element that it is. The same exact type of element that is found underneath this drop down. Okay? Alright, so let's do a little bit of poche. So let's go to our floor plan. So right now our floor plan is cutting through our model at 4 feet above level 1. So we can manipulate the poche of both the walls, the columns, as well as the curtain wall. So let's go in. Let's set a view template for the floor plan. Do architectural plan, and then like we did with the other one, let's set this to 1 inch equals 10 foot to match our current scale. Hit fine, detail level, and then under model, let's change a couple of these. So we have columns, we have walls, and we have curtain walls. And curtain walls, as I kind of alluded to before, they're broken up into curtain panels, curtain systems, and curtain wall mullions. So let's change the cut pattern for the curtain wall mullions to blue. So let's do a solid fill, and then let's select a nice blue. Press OK. Press OK. And then since we're cutting through the mullions, let's create a thicker line type for that. So let's just do 3. Okay. All right. And then current panels. Let's just keep that the same since we manipulated those in the other drawings and the elevations. Let's find columns. So structural columns are going to be found under structural elements. So structural columns. Let's change their poche to a nice maroon. Let's do orange. Press OK. That's all right. And then let's do lines. Let's keep it solid. And then since these are getting cut through and they're big elements, let's make those 5. Of course, my cloud. Okay. And then the last thing are our 2 walls. So if we scroll down to walls, change our cut to solid and our color to green. Ugh. Press OK, press OK. All right, so now if we go in, press OK, press OK. Now all of our different poches and line widths have transferred in. Okay. So that's just a brief overview of the graphic styles that you can do within Revit. You can get super detailed within them and set up very custom view templates that you can associate to each one of your drawings. Remember that you have, of course, my cloud is getting slow. Sorry, guys. One of the downfalls of cloud-based. Yep, and of course not. Oh. Okay, sorry. One thing to remember. When you're doing this is you can set up these view templates and make them really nice and clean and beautiful so that when you do start to set up your design presentations, all you have to do is export this base drawing and you can just insert them into your presentations. Another thing I should probably cover really quick is your annotations. So let's say we don't want our elevations showing up within this view. Now we can go around and just hide each individual one, or we can go into our view template, and then instead of going to the override model elements, we can go to override annotation. So anything annotation, grid lines, structure symbols, elevation symbols, they're all going to be found underneath the annotation. Anything not modeled but two-dimensional underneath annotations. We can scroll down to elevations here, uncheck that, and then let's say we want to have our grids in there, but we want them to be a little bit more in the background. We can go down to grids and select that halftone checkbox. Press OK. Press OK again. Now we've gotten rid of our elevation markers, and our grids are now halftone, so a little bit more in the background of the drawings, not so contrasted. Let's see. Let's do for our floor plan. Let's do architectural plan, and let's turn on those shadows again really quick. Whoa. So what just happened? Well, in our view template, there is a view range. So that view range has it cutting through at the associated level, which apparently the site plan was cutting through at level 1, and it's having it cut through at 4 feet above that associated level. Of course, if we want to see the roof, we need it to be above that level. So we can do one of two things. We can either change this, but of course, if we change it here, it's going to change back in the first floor plan, which has the same template associated with it. Or what we can do is if we want to have, oh my god, sorry guys, I'll explain this. So if we want to have two different drawings with the same graphic styles, but we have different elements associated with them. Let's say we want to have this one be cut a little bit higher than this one. All we have to do is next to the view range, uncheck include and hit OK. And now we can change the view range differently for each one of these drawings. So this one right now is being cut 4 feet above level 1. This one currently is being cut 4 feet above level 1, but we want to change that so that it is above. Oh my goodness. Oh, there we go. Unlimited. And then let's cut this 20 feet above. Press OK. Oop. Gonna have to do a little bit more than that. Let's do 50. Okay. So now we have some shadow. You know what? Shadow is a little bit too dark. You don't want your shadow or anything like that overpowering your drawing. You just want to add a little bit of depth. So under your view template, underneath shadow, this is where you check boxes on off for shadows. But to actually control the darkness of your shadows, you have to go into the lighting. So this is where you can set those sun settings. Yeah, sun settings. You can also, and you can change the azimuth. So if you want, let's see. Let's change this from sunlight. Let's do single day. Summer solstice. Let's do 2 o'clock. Get a little bit of angle in there. Press OK. And then, like I was saying before I got distracted, shadows. So this is the amount of shadow and sun within your specific view. So this is how we control the darkness of the shadows. So we can just drag this down, and let's do 10%. Let's do 10% ambient light too. Press OK, and press OK. Now we have a really light shadow, just giving us a slight sense of depth. It's not overpowering the drawing. Now, of course, you're probably thinking at this point, Garrett, what are you doing? These look kind of terrible. Yes, they do. These are just to inform you of the different methods and ways that you can manipulate the graphic styles of your drawings to make them more architecturally appealing and aesthetically beautiful. Please do not feel like you have to, create your drawings with red outlines or green poche. You can either do really nice grayscales or just have it pop with an accent color. But this is just one way to adjust those drawings. Okay? There's a lot more that you can do, but for right now, I think this is a good overview. And remember, if you want to print this drawing, all you gotta do is go File, Print, and then go to one of your PDF creators. I do Bluebeam PDF, but you do whatever you have loaded on your computer. And then under Setup, you'll want to select the same size sheet, or same size paper as your sheet. So go down, Ours is Arc D, or 24 by 36. Sure, it's in the same orientation, landscape. And then let's do, instead of fit to page, do zoom, have it be 100% of the size since it's the same size. And then you can just do offset from corner or center, whichever you want. Hit OK. And then make sure it's under current view. Press OK. It'll populate with the save as. You save it with whichever file you want, and then you can save that PDF and start manipulating it in whatever post editor you want, whether that be Illustrator, InDesign, etc. I know the way I used to do it is I would set these up in a drawing sheet that was the same size as the sheet that I was setting up before. And then instead of exporting the sheet, printing the sheet, I would just go back into the view and export the individual view at the correct scale. The reason to do this is so that instead of having a sheet with all of the drawings compiled on it and not being able to manipulate each individual drawing independently, if you export them independently, you can then place them onto whatever presentation board you're setting up and be able to manipulate them on their own. Okay. I hope this helps. Let's, for your assignment, or for what you need to submit for class today, let's do this board plus 2 sections, so a longitudinal section and a cross section, with the floors being pochade blue. Okay. If you have any questions, I will be around. Thanks, guys.